Hello and welcome to Auto Shenanigans. How the devil are you? Have you had a good week? My name is John. Thank you very much for joining me for another exciting episode of Secrets of the Motorway. Last week we looked at the A38M in Berkshire only to realise that it was pretty rubbish. I hope to make up for that this week as I've come to Birmingham to look at the Aston Expressway, also known as the A38M. Despite being little over 2 miles long, this inner-city motorway promises several interesting features, with one potentially dangerous feature unique to the A38M, not to be found on any other motorway, but we'll come to that later. It would be in 1972 that the A38M would open, with its main function to connect the M6 motorway to the inner city of Birmingham. Officially, it doesn't have any junctions, but there are a couple of slip roads that we'll get to in a bit. For us, the motorway starts in Gravelly Hill next to junction 6 of the M6, and interestingly, there are two slip roads that allow you to join the A38M heading in the same direction. One links off the A5127 and the other from the A38. That last one's quite interesting because for a short distance, the slip road runs as a dual layer road, if that's the term. In either situation, you're immediately sent upwards onto an elevated carriageway which carries the A38M for about half of its length, or about a mile. As you round the corner, it's hard to miss the extensive flyovers and slip roads that dart all over the place. This is the famous Gravelly Hill Interchange, better known as Spaghetti Junction. For us on the A38M, it's quite a simple affair as we drive through it, but from above it looks like anything but. The interchange has around 2.5 miles of slip road, meaning we could fit the A38M in here with space left over. They're spread over 5 levels, reaching a height of around 25 metres, supported on over 550 concrete columns. And if it wasn't for the A38M, this elaborate interchange may never have been built. Sources suggest that the early plans and ideas for the Gravelly Hill interchange were far simpler, comprising a set of slip roads and an offset roundabout. However, these ideas were thought up at a time when the A38M wasn't a thing. When it was announced that the A38M was going to be built, the interchange saw a slight redesign into what we have today. The interchange opened in 1972 at the same time as the A38M. Underneath the interchange we find a railway, 3 canals and 2 rivers. One of those rivers is the River Tame, and in the 1800s a reservoir was constructed alongside the river with a capacity to store 111,000 cubic metres of drinking water. In later years the reservoir was used as a boating lake, and on occasion in the 1950s was used as a location for speedboat races. I can't find many details on the races themselves. Oh, sorry, buddy, you're there. Sorry. No, you're welcome to. You've probably been there for 5 minutes whilst I'm nattering on. I can't find many details on the races themselves, but I think they were more amateur races rather than a professional series. These days, boating of any kind is not allowed on the reservoir. As you head away from the Gravelly Hill interchange, you quickly notice the lack of central reservation and a rather odd central lane that's covered in red tarmac. This is the potentially dangerous feature that I mentioned at the start of the programme. This feature, if you can call it that, is only found on the A38M, and it's called a tidal flow system. It's supposed to help with congestion, and the way it works is that during the morning rush hour, 4 out of 7 lanes are open to traffic heading into Birmingham city centre. 2 of the lanes are open to traffic heading out of the city centre, leaving 1 lane for separation. In the evening rush hour, it's all reversed. So why is it dangerous then? Well, the lack of central reservation could cause a spot of bother, but don't worry, they thought about that by imposing a 50-mile-an-hour speed limit on the motorway, so now the closing speed of a head-on collision is only 100 miles an hour. Happy days then. There's also no hard shoulder, so I can't wait to break down on the A38M. While several vehicles crash into me, I can at least appreciate how the A38M is technically a single carriageway road due to it not having a central reservation. This makes it the only single carriageway motorway in the country. It doesn't get much better either. As we head towards the city centre, the motorway drops into a cutting, so now not only do you have no central reservations or hard shoulders, you've got some solid concrete walls to bounce off. It's at this point that we find the A38M's only junction, if you can call it that. It doesn't have a number, and it's a limited access junction where you can join the A38M heading northbound, or you can exit when going southbound. With space a problem at the time of the motorway's construction, it's possible that they just couldn't fit in these missing slip roads. However, it's more likely designed this way with traffic flow in mind. The junction allows for easy access to and from the M6, but it doesn't feed excess traffic down to the city centre. I thought I'd take a moment to appreciate the view. This is the view. Why have these benches? Fuck's sake, camera up. Just up from there is the site of the former Aston Cross HP sauce factory, which for over 100 years stood as a landmark for the area. But interestingly, the sauce itself was developed and invented in Nottingham by Frederick Garton. He registered the HP source name in 1895, but it all went tits up in 1899, where apparently, due to owing the Midland Vinegar Company of Aston Cross a load of money, Garton was somewhat forced to hand over the name and recipe to his HP sauce as payment. From then on, the Midland Vinegar Company would sell and manufacture HP sauce, profiting massively, and it's how HP sauce ended up being manufactured here in Aston Cross, Birmingham. Or it was. In 2005, the site and company was sold to Heinz, who closed the factory and moved production over to Holland, ending over 100 years of HP sauce manufacturing in Birmingham. The factory has long since been demolished, but before it was, the thousands of gallons of surplus HP sauce that they'd made was shipped over to Holland, bottled up there and then shipped back to the UK for sale, but at least Birmingham's got a clean air zone. Apparently, when it existed, the A38M cut right through the middle of the factory site, and this created a bit of an unusual situation. Vinegar is the main component of HP sauce, and at the time was stored on one area of the site, needing to be piped over to another for processing. Before, this was easy, but with the A38M coming along, they had to build an aerial pipeline system to transport the vinegar around, and at one point these pipelines would have crossed over the motorway. There's no trace of these today, but there is an unused bridge sat in the appropriate place. Whilst it could have been used as access to and from the factory, it could also have carried vinegar pipelines over the motorway. At the Dartmouth Circus roundabout, we find the end of the A38M, but on the roundabout itself, we find this unmissable contraption known as a Graysbrook beam engine. Built in 1817, this engine is said to be the largest steam engine ever used in Birmingham, and its main function was to blow air over the hot coals found in a blast furnace to keep the heat as high as possible. The company who made the engine can be traced back as far as 1641, where Michael Graysbrook founded a glassworks on the outskirts of Birmingham. After expanding with a forge and opening their own colliery in 1800, the company would move into iron and machine fabrication, creating such beasts as what we find at the Dartmouth Circus roundabout. The engine was operational until 1912, so the best part of 100 years, and evidently there was nothing wrong with it because it served as a backup engine until the 1960s, at which point it was dismantled, and for some reason it was moved to a roundabout next to the A38M. And as said, that roundabout is where we find the end of the A38M. If you want to carry on down into the city centre, at this point you'll pick up the A38. It seems that there weren't ever plans for the motorway to extend further than the Dartmouth Circus roundabout, but there were extensive plans at one point for ring roads around Birmingham, and in the case of the A4540, for the most part they actually finished it.
Take a look at this model of the road section completed. But this tunnel model is just part of a much bigger affair.
For the most part, the bits that they missed out were things like free-flowing sliproads and flyovers, and indeed at the Dartmouth Circus roundabout we're missing a flyover that would have carried the A4540 over the end of the motorway. It's absolutely not a coincidence that you'll find ample space between some of the carriageways because of course this was left for the addition of a flyover. And there we are then guys, that's all we've got time for this week. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you liked the video. If you did, there is of course a button specifically for that, and if you haven't subscribed already, please consider doing so. That'd be wicked sweet awesome. Enjoy the rest of your week, whatever it is you get up to. My name's John, you've been watching Auto Shenanigans, and I'll see you guys next time for another exciting episode of Secrets of the Motorway. Until then, take care, bye bye.